Welcome back with a smiling face. Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. Embers of Rebellion. Episode 7. Chapter 57. I will be back soon, I said when I answered. No, it's fine. I got someone in to cover you. I figured you were concussed, but Zoe isn't answering, and I am on tonight, and Mum has hurt her knee again, so she can't watch both girls. Can you and Lucian please, come to get Casey for the night? What do you mean Zoe isn't answering? Did you knock on the door? Macy cleared her throat before speaking in a hushed voice. I did, but I don't think she could hear me over all the showering sounds coming from the house, she hissed. I snorted. Who would have thought? They are like strabbits. I have been up there twice now, and I swear my ears are bleeding. Anyone would think we are running a brothel with the noises leaving your apartment. What's a BR0THEL? On to Macy. I heard Casey asked in the background. Ah, a place where people get foot massages, Macy answers awkwardly. Lucian chuckles but turns the car around, hearing her. Yep, we are on our way now. Meet us out the front, I tell her. Thank God, but you need to talk to her. Why do I have to talk to her? You're the eldest. I told her. Because I can't say anything after what you saw the other day, and don't say you didn't tell Zoe. I know you did, and you're the only one not getting LA. Foot messages around here, Macy corrects herself. Oh no, you talk to her, I will scissor paper rock you for it, fine deal, but don't cry when I win, like I always do. Lucian raises an eyebrow at me and shakes his head. I say goodbye and hang up the phone. Are you two seriously going to fight over who is giving Zoe talk? Yes, unless you want to do it. I asked hopefully. Not a chance. Wait, what do I get for it if I do? Lucian asked, and I folded my arms. I was not making any more deals with the devil, and I know he would pick his words wisely if I did, so I couldn't get out of it. We pulled up out the front, and Macy was waiting out front with a bag for Casey. I chucked some of Taylor's spare clothes in it for her, and school was cancelled. I just got the notification because of a COVID case, I sighed and nodded. Shtbandemic. Macy buckled Casey in, before stopping at my window and holding her fist out. I rolled my eyes, and we quickly played rock, paper, scissors while Lucian laughed at us. Macy fist-pumped the air when her scissors cut my paper. No. I cried. I finally beat you, she said, doing a victory dance and shaking her ass at me. I shook my head in defeat. I expect a total reenactment of the cringingness of that talk and proper behavior in our hotel, Macy said triumphantly. Fine, but you get the next awkward talk. No, way, the last talk still haunts me when I had to explain to both you girls the importance of pap smears. You could have just told us you didn't have to diagrams and or reenact on our dining room table. I haven't looked at the table the same, and you owe me a desk, I tell her. If I have to give you girls awkward talks, I will be thorough. Valerie always said get your facts straight, and I did that, Macy said. We were mortified. Valerie thought it was pretty funny, even helped me do the diagram, Macy laughed. I chuckled. She sounds like a cool old lady, Lucian said, and both Macy and I froze, forgetting entirely about Lucian and how casually we spoke of his mother. She was a marvelous woman, Macy said with a sad smile. I nodded before saying goodbye. Love you, Casey, Macy called. Casey waved. Love you too, Casey retorted, blowing her a kiss. Lucian drove out and back onto the highway, and Casey leaned forward in her seat. Look, Uncle Lucian, I brought trolls. Auntie Macy said I could because it is your favorite, she said, holding up the DVD to show him. Uncle Lucian? I asked her. Auntie Macy said he was your boyfriend and would marry you one day. Did she now? I asked. Yep, so that makes him my uncle, but if he is my uncle, how will I marry Valerian? Wouldn't that make him my cousin? Though Taylor said she is and that I would have to marry Uncle Fester from the Addams family, I told her I am, Casey said. I snickered, and I saw Lucian smile as he glanced at her in the mirror. My boy is a ladies' man. I smacked his GH, and he grabbed my hand before I could pull it away. He kissed the back of it when he lifted it to his lips, before keeping hold of it on his lap. So can we watch Trolls when we get to your place? Casey asked. Yes, we can watch it on repeat, if you like, I told her. Yay, Valerian is going to be so excited about our sleepover. Casey, you live with Valerian. Every night is a sleepover, I chuckle. Oh, right? I guess it is, she said, bouncing happily in the back of the car. The drive was short, and I was looking forward to lying down. Yawning, I stepped out of the elevator and followed Lucian to his apartment. He unlocked the door, and the first thing I could smell was pancakes. My brows furrowed, and I followed Lucian in with Casey, who ran ahead. Ah, not trolls, I heard Valerian whine. 0H, where did you come from, little one? I heard Callan's voice. Casey pointed to us down the hall, and Callan walked over and looked at us. I'm Casey, and I came with them. Oh, you're back. We were making pancakes, Callan said, before rushing back to the kitchen as he plated up. Pancakes and ice cream for dinner, Dad, really? You never complained when you were a kid, Callan told him. Want some? I made heaps, he said, pulling a huge tray off the stove. Lucian shook his head. Why not? Pancakes for dinner, it is then, Lucian laughed. Callan was dressed in a suit with a white apron on and chef hat. He looked alien standing in the kitchen. And some for Miss Casey, Callan said, handing her a plate. Both kids raced excitedly toward the table with their plates. When Callan shocked me as I walked to the sink, wanting to get a glass of water. He hugged me and pecked me on the cheek, while I remained stiff and still as a statue. Marin dear, so happy to see you again, he chirped. I looked at Lucian, who shrugged and tried to steal a pancake from the tray. His father smacked his hand with the egg flip. Let me plate it up the way you used to like, he scolded, and I chuckled while Lucian seemed to pout before stealing one. You rotten little sod, Callan barked at him. Has no manners, Marin, anyone would think a Neanderthal raised him, Callan said, shaking his head, while making Lucian's pancakes with a chalk chip smiley face with 2 blobs of ice cream for ears. Chapter 58. We ate dinner, or should I say breakfast, for dinner. Callan was reluctant to leave and was very hands-on, playing with the kids, but we needed to get them showered and dressed for bed, so Callan said his goodbyes and left, stating he would see us at the Alpha meeting. Valerian, time for a shower, buddy, then you have to go to bed, Lucian told him. Valerian got up off the lounge, and Casey followed. Casey, you will have to wait until he hops out, I told her. But Mum showered with Dante with clothes on. Why can't I shower with Valerian? Valerian scrunched his face up while I just looked at Lucian, hoping he would explain, but it was Valerian that answered her. Gosh, you can be silly, Casey. People don't shower with clothes on. How would you get clean? Valerian asked while shaking his head. Dante did. He told me he was showering with clothes on with Mum, probably because he didn't want to tell you he was making babies with Aunt Zoe. You can't make babies in a shower. Wait, how do you make babies? Casey asked, and both of them looked at us. Well, that diverted quickly. Lucian cleared his throat and pulled at the neckline of his shirt, uncomfortable with the direction the conversation had gone. And how does the baby get in there? Must I tell you everything? The man takes the baby and puts it in cabbage, the woman eats the cabbage, and her belly gets fat, Valerian says. Lucian raised an eyebrow at his explanation while I tried not to laugh. That's not how babies are made. You got that of that cartoon, the one the Cabbage Patch Dolls, Casey argued. Well, how else would Mum have a baby? Valerian retorted. Fine, they would know. Ask your parents, Casey huffed and pouted. I snickered as I bailed, leaving that for Lucian to find a way out of. Starting to clean the kitchen, both kids looked at Lucian expectantly, who seemed very uncomfortable. They just happen, Lucian said. That was his big explanation to the birds and the bees. But how? Casey asked. By showering together, Lucian blurted. See, I told you, Dante was making babies in the shower. You said the man puts the baby in a cabbage, so if he is showering, where does the cabbage come from? Casey asks, and Valerian seems to think. I don't know, let's get it, Valerian says, racing to the table for his father's laptop. However, Lucian was quick to get to his feet and snatch the laptop up before he could grab it. No, it is bedtime. Shower now, but we want to know, Valerian whined. Lucian scrubs a hand down his face before looking over at me and glaring at me, and I smirk. Yes, best explain how babies are made, Alpha, I chuckled, and he growled at me while both kids waited for him to answer. Lucian dropped onto the couch with a sigh. Well, when a man and woman love each other, they do grown-up things which make a baby. What grown-up things? Valerian asked, suddenly very interested in this topic of conversation. Like kissing and hugging, and adult wrestling, Lucian offered, and the kids pulled grossed-out faces. Wait, is Mum kissing Dante in the shower with clothes on? Casey asked. Casey, I told you people don't shower with their clothes on, Valerian asked. Yeah, they do. Or Dante would see Mum's private parts, so. People see private parts all the time when they shift. Remember that hippie lady out at the reserve? She took her clothes off before shifting, and we saw her BVTT, and her big hairy front BVTT. Hey, you're so smart, Valerian, I forgot about that, Casey says. But if Mum and Dante are kissing in the shower, oh, I am going to be a big sister. I always wanted to be a sister. Where are we going to fit a sister? Our house is too small, and no baby is sleeping in my room, huffed Valerian before he shook his head, walking off to the bathroom. I'm going to be a sister, I'm going to be a sister, Casey laughed and danced in the living room. I say let Zoe break the news about being a sister, and thanks for the help, by the way, Lucian said, coming over and grabbing a tea towel and drying the dishes as I washed them. You are aware I have a dishwasher? He asked. Yep, I needed an escape. Dishes sounded like a good one, I told him. After the kids were showered and dressed for bed, I helped tidy up their dining room and living room mess. Are you staying in our room, or? Lucian asked hopefully. Yes, and you mean your room? I don't live here, yet, Lucian says, and I shake my head at him. Besides, Zoe will need the extra space since Casey is going to be a big sister, Lucian chuckled. I'm sure Dante has an apartment or place. Nope, he prefers to stay at the pack house. Well, if by chance they decide to have kids, I will move out into one of the other flats at the hotel, I tell him. It's not if by chance, more like when they have kids. Dante has always been vocal about wanting kids. And why would you move into another apartment when you can move in here, Lucian? What? You said so yourself that the media will go crazy when we announce we are mates. I could imagine the stories already if we don't live together, Marin, Lucian said, picking up all the pencils that fell under the table. We can work it out, I tell him, watching him set the pencils into their rightful places. That would take all night if he planned on putting them in their selected spot. Shaking my head, I took them from him and jammed them in any order. His jaw clenched, and I knew he wanted to sort them, but Casey would only pull them out again. Or you can stop being so stubborn and move in here. I happen to like being on my own. I don't have to answer to anyone, besides I have the hotel, so I need to be at the hotel, then I will move in with you, Lucian says. What part of I like my independence don't you get? The independence part, because we are mates, Marin. Mates live together, not in separate places. Besides, Valerian likes it here, and I want to be with my son. I swear, Lucian, if you pull like Mitcha, I will lose it, then don't make me. Valerian can't go from house to house just because you're too stubborn about living with me. Either, we are mates, or we are not, Marin. So make up your mind, Lucian snapped. I am not saying you can't see him, I am just saying I don't want to live with you. I am sick and tired of your mixed signals. 1 minute, you're saying you will be my Luna, and now this, Lucian growled before he stormed off angrily. I felt terrible because of the stupid bond. Chapter 59. Lucian came back a few minutes later with a towel before marching into the bathroom and shutting the door while muttering under his breath. I heard the shower start and sighed. He had a point, though. The media would go insane over two mates, especially one holding status in the city but living apart. The scandals it would lead to, and I could only imagine the speculation it would cause and the rift once everyone found out I was, in fact, Alpha John's daughter. That was another thing I was also worried about, because it would come out. Secrets always do, they never remain hidden, and I know it would all come out when they dug into my past. Yet the thought of having to answer to someone irked me, and living with Lucian, I knew I would have to, plus he could pull rank over me, yet the stories that would be in the papers. I could already imagine the headlines. Pack rivalry keeping mates apart. Lucian's cheating ways trouble with the notorious Alpha stupid, and that would be stacked on top of them Marin the gold digger trapping the Alpha ones. I never thought of the different scenarios, and now they appeared endless. Lucian walked out of the bathroom with a towel wrapped around his waist. He ignored me, and I could feel he was upset. I chewed my lip before getting up off the couch, wandering down the hall toward his bedroom, and pushing the door open. Lucian was getting ready for bed as he pulled the sheets back. If you are coming in here to tell me you don't want to live with me or to give more bullshit excuses, Marin, I don't want to hear it, Lucian said, climbing in bed and tugging the blankets up. He turned away from me, facing the wall, and I sighed before showering myself and returning to the room. I rummaged through his closet for a shirt to wear before climbing in bed with him. Through the bond, I could tell he was still festering over our argument and very much awake as he kept his back to me. You said earlier you wanted to be my Luna. How do you expect to do that if we live separately, he said. The Alpha meeting is in 2 days. What do you expect me to tell everyone? Marin and I are mates, but it's complicated. This isn't like updating a status, Marin, I get you don't want me to mark you yet, but at least try. I remained quiet, pondering over my thoughts and his words when he rolled over to face me. What are you afraid I will do, that you keep refusing to try and make this work? Lucian asked. There were plenty of things I was afraid of, Lucian taking control of everything in my life when I only just got some semblance of the normal back in it. I was scared of him taking my son and me losing the hotel and everyone who relies on that place, worried about the rogue woman losing everything when they have no jobs because I failed them. But most of all, I was afraid of ending up back in a car living in the train station parking lot with Valerian. I was scared of losing everything, just like I had. Going back to having nothing and no one, at least with how things are, he can't control everything. He can't take it from me. Anything I say will sound like an excuse, I tell him and he sighs. Unless you had lived with the hopelessness of failing at everything and having no one to rely on, you couldn't understand how terrifying it is to allow someone else to have even the slightest bit of control when you worked so hard to get where you are. Moving in with Lucian would be trusting him not to break me again, not to take everything I worked hard for away from me, and trusting him not to throw me away like trash like my family did. Try to explain, I want to understand Marin. No, but just tell me, Lucian breathed, frustrated. I lost everything for our son, everything, Lucian. I had no one and oh my him until I found that place. No one helped me until Valerie, my own father, couldn't bear the sight of me. Society displayed me as some vile home wrecking, I lived with that. The other rogue women lived with that. I won't lose it all, I won't go back to that place where I let myself think I would have help, only to find out I wouldn't and that everything could be taken away from me, I answered honestly. I used to use the excuse it was his cheating, the fact he didn't recognize me, but deep down it had nothing to with that because he was here now, he proved he would stay, it was my own thoughts that ruined everything, I knew it was toxic, and my own safety mechanism, but it was the truth. Until you hit rock bottom and clawed your way back, no one can tell you not to fear ending up back there again. And that thought terrified me, I had too much to lose now, and if I did, I would lose everything, including my son. But no one is taking anything from you, Marin, you did. I know that it's in the past, I know you want to make up for it, but it haunts me. Do you have any idea how lonely it is when you have a baby relying on you to keep it alive and fed when you have nothing and no one to help? Then to feel so selfish for forcing that life on a child. Choosing yourself over your own kid because you can't bear the heartbreak of giving them up, you can't bear the thought of letting someone else raise them. I lived with that guilt of thinking I was destroying my son, so I damn near k***led myself to earn the right to be his mother, one he deserved. I created a life for us, I won't lose it, I tell him. You do deserve him, and none of that will happen again, I am here now, Lucian says. Yes, you are, but what happens once you mark me? You make me give up the hotel? Take it from me, from them. Before Valerian, I was oblivious to how this city was run, like any other alpha. Shunned the rogue until I found myself one of them. Zoe, Macy, and I, we built that place. I won't allow you to take it from us, from those that work there. I won't just quit because you want a Luna. And I know you expect that. You expect that because it is what is taught to us. Lunas abide by their AIFA. The alpha has control. No one should have that son of power over someone else, you think I will make you give it up? Lucian asks. Yes, but I am also worried about what they will think when I become one of those that suppressed them in the first place. You marking me doesn't just affect me, it affects them when I become what society wants. What you want, I tell him. What do you want then? What I want is for my son not to be ashamed because he is rogue, I want the stereotypes gone. I want everything I have worked for to mean something so our son can say she tried. She had nothing but made something, something that made a difference, and that is why I don't want you marking me. It will be like throwing everything we worked hard for away if you make me give it up, to toss what I was trying to change away, and all of them will go back to being just another rogue, and I will just be another selfish alpha, I tell him. I just want my mate Marin, that is all. You say that now until everyone stands putting pressure on you to force me to conform to their ways, you think I will remain quiet in alpha meetings? When they speak garbage against the way they treat rogue or when the packs bring in another law that restricts them more, like the stupid schooling cuts they made last year. It will cause an uproar, one that will reflect poorly on you because you can't keep your Luna in line. You pull rank over me, Lucian. You will have control, and when they kick up a stink that I am speaking against the way they have lived for decades, I know you will use it against me, I tell him clutching my head. Everything was so fked up, and the stress was beginning to get to me, the stress of the mate bond, the hotel, people going missing, my father and this stupid alpha meeting. Tears burned my eyes. I was so sick and tired of the responsibility, but at the same time I needed to keep going. No, you think you know, Marin. I am not trying to take anything from you, use your title how you want to abolish the laws for all I care, I'll even help you, I scoff and drop my hands and look over at him. That would go down well, the media would tear shreds off him, his pack would become a laughingstock. I shake my head. He seems to think it is so easy. That I should just accept him because his title could help, but it could also destroy everything. Lucian sighs and sits up on his elbow and looks down at me. I mean it, Marin, you want to help the rogues. What better position than one of power? Change the laws, change their views, but do it with me by your side and in your corner. You think you have to solve all their problems yourself. You don't. You backing me would stand a war, Lucian. Wars never solved anything, just got innocent people *LLED, yes, you're right. But then those wars ended up in history books and became everyone's turning point, a reflection of how we messed up and a place to see the error of their ways. You're worried about war? The packs are always at war. But why not go to war for something that will hold value, give a future to someone who otherwise had none? You have my pack. They will fight for you if you are my Luna, they will fight for the rogues. My brows crease as I think over his words, yet him saying it and allowing it after he marked me are two different things. One thing I have realized since meeting you is that the rogues hold just as much value, and are capable of more than they realize. Because not one of your people have ever talked down to me, treated me differently, or those that enter your doors, they treat everyone with kindness even though they are shown none. You want to change the laws, change things for the rogues, then let me help you. You could go back on your word, though, Lucian, I whispered. He could ruin everything because me taking that title gives him everything I own, what the rogues own. I won't. I swear I won't, and I will prove it, Lucian sighs, dropping his head on my shoulder and groans. He felt defeated, yet I could also tell he understood because his anger was gone. How? I ask. Because tomorrow I will open up my pack's schools for the rogue children, and I am shutting down that terrible place you call a Shuai. He lifts his head back up and presses his forehead against mine. Besides, when I spoke to Valerian about changing schools, he refused unless Casey and Taylor could come to his new school, so the more, the merrier. But what of the rogues that work there? They will lose their jobs, and I hear Mountain View Hotel is looking for extra employees. We can help find them jobs. We can work it out, Lucian says. In a city where rogues can't go past the two streets on either side of the main street unless it is for the reserve, there are no jobs, Lucian, no one will hire them. Lucian sighed and appeared to think for a second before pushing his knee between my legs and shoving them apart. Chapter 60. I raised an eyebrow at him, and he smirked at me before answering as he moved between my legs and rested his arms on my pillow. Lucian. I growl, looking away but also not wanting to shove him off because the tingling sensation made my stomach warm and fuzzy. He chuckles but presses his weight against me when I don't shove him off. Then I will drop my borders for them, Lucian says, and my eyes snap to his. You would do that? I asked and he nods. Maybe once I do, the other packs may open their borders, too. Lucian, the media will destroy you for that, I tell him and he shrugs. And after the alpha meeting and I announce my mate is a rogue, it will give them something else to talk about. I don't care for my reputation, Marin. No matter what, the media will find some way to destroy it, so why not give them something good to talk about, let them open the debate, then we can focus on changing their views, he says before leaning down and brushing his nose across my cheek to my ear and down my jaw. Lucian, it is impossible to think with you doing that, I tell him as his hands bunch the shirt up I am wearing at my hip. Don't think, just agree, you have no excuses now, Marin, I can think of plenty, I tell him as he nips at my jaw, making me groan and shudder beneath him. Are they all to do with the rogues and you thinking I am going to ruin you? He murmurs before kissing down my neck. I nod, my eyes closing, loving the feel of his lips on my skin as I tried to keep my thoughts clear that were suddenly becoming hazier. Then let me prove it, tomorrow I will drop the borders and open the schools and my pack to the rogues, you could just be saying that to get in my pants, I tell him as his hand travels down. He laughs softly. Well, that would be an added bonus, but you are not wearing any panties, so I don't need to try and get into them, my eyes fly open at his words. I thought it would be a bit odd borrowing those when I am already wearing your shirt, I tell him. What's mine is yours, he says while tugging my shirt up higher. And what's mine will be yours if you mark me, I tell him, a little bitterly. He pulls his face away from my neck and stares down at me. You're worried I will take everything from you, right? I nodded and sighed. What if I made it, so I can't, he asked. What do you mean? What if I hand my pack over to you, what? I will stand down, make you alpha. I will give you my pack, he says like it made perfect sense. Lucian, I can't ask you to do that, and then what, you become my Luna. He seems to think. Now that would be a first, he mumbled. I'm being serious, Lucian, so am I, Marin. I mean it. I just want you, what the other packs think, I will stand down as alpha, and I don't know, just be your mate, no, I am not taking your place, and no. I don't want to be an alpha. Luna maybe, but no, I have the rogues to worry about, I don't want to worry about pack issues on top, and technically you would still be alpha. You can't just stop being an alpha, I tell him. He sighs because he knows I am right unless I make him rogue or forsaken after giving me his title. Yet, you're right because I have to mark you anyway, so you don't d*e on me, he says with a huff. What about a prenup then? Still holds no legal accountability when you're an alpha. Then I don't know, Marin. What do you want me to do because you don't trust me not to take everything from you? I chew my lip, trying to think. I won't take anything from you, you keep saying I will toss you away or make you give up helping the rogues, I won't. They are your village, Valerian's village, and his family. So don't trust me not to hurt you, trust I won't hurt our son, wait, you won't hurt our son, I murmur to myself. Because I know he wouldn't. I knew that for certain, I could feel how much he loves Valerian, loves me. He could hurt me out of spite, but he wouldn't hurt Valerian. Of course not, I may be a SHTTY mate, well, not SHTTY, but you know what I mean, but I am good father, Marin. I would never hurt our son, then get a judge to sign everything over to him, what? Everything I own is to be signed over to Valerian, with me having total control until he is 18, you want a conservatorship? He asked, shocked. Then I have nothing for you to take, it belongs to Valerian. Lucian shakes his head. No, keep your hotel, but I will sign everything I own over to you, all deeds, all accounts, but you could easily get back, Lucian. You're an alpha, I tell him. But it would still take me months in court, he argues. You own the courts, I deadpan. Not the human ones, I don't. Everything I own I will file in the human courts over to you. I can't touch you then and will have to fight for it back the human way, he said, making a face. But then I will look like a gold digger, I tell him and shake my head. Then just trust me, for once trust someone other than yourself, or give Zoe and Macy part ownership something. I can only control legally what you own, I can't control it if it isn't in my name, and Dante won't ever do that to Zoe, Lucian says. And you would get a judge to do that, help me sign it over equally to Macy and Zoe. I asked, shocked he would allow me to hand half the hotel over. If it means I can have you, then yes, besides, as you said, they helped build that place, only fair they get half of it, you could probably do it yourself with a lawyer, he says. No tricks? I ask. No, tricks, he says, smiling down at me. I nodded, actually liking that idea, and I couldn't wait to tell Zoe and Macy. Oh, thank G0D, Lucian groans before kissing me. Lucian. I mumble against his lips. Quiet, you have run out of excuses now, he laughs while his hands claw at my shirt. I suppose I had now. But you are not marking me until after the AIFA meeting, and the documents are signed. He hums in agreement, pressing himself against me and sucks at my neck. I am 0ANED, trying to keep my head while his lips attacked my skin. Lucian. I shrieked when I felt his shirt tear in his hands, exposing me to him. He pulls away and sighs. I said yes, I won't mark you until the paperwork is signed, he whined. So please let me touch. I yanked him closer and kissed him and he groaned, settling back between my legs. I shiver when he kisses me back. No, wrestling, we can't fit Zoe's brother or sister in our house, and I am not sharing a room, comes Valerian's voice suddenly beside the bed. Lucian leapt off me and I jumped, ripping the blanket up to cover myself. What are you doing in here? You are supposed to be in bed, Lucian said, clutching his chest like he was about to have a heart attack. Casey keeps sleep talking and woke me up, Valerian huffed. Come on, I will tuck you back in, Lucian tells him. No, I want to sleep in here, so you can't make me share my room, Valerian says, glaring at me. Lucian groans, clearly annoyed our son was blocking him. But there will be plenty of room if we move in here with your father, 2 extra rooms, I tell him, not that I was planning on having unprotected S*X anyway, but he didn't need to know that. Really? We are going to live here now? Valerian asks, his little eyes lighting up, and Lucian looks over at me. I nod, and he smiles before motioning for Valerian to follow him so he can put him back to bed. Fine, but I want a brother, not a sister. I have lived with Casey for so long now, and I am sick of watching trolls, Valerian whines. Somehow, I don't think it works like that. You don't get to choose, Lucian tells him. Then just wrestle in a boy way to make a boy, Valerian says simply like it made total sense. I chuckle and shake my head. I will keep that in mind, Lucian tells him while walking him back to his room. Chapter 61. Lucian, tucking Valerian in bed, I was excited to get back to Marin. Finally, I just want her to touch it and even look at it. I would take anything at this point. I am not picky, I will probably blow a load. Walking to the door, I had a spring in my step until my spawn opened his little mouth. Can you read me a book? Valerian asks. I froze with my hand on the door mid-escape. Please be a 5-page pop-up book with 1 sentence on each page. Sure, I tell him, turning around and stepping over Casey, who was asleep on his trundle. Valerian holds up the never-ending story. It literally was a never-ending story. The thing was at least 500 pages. Please be big lettering like page size, 1 letter a page, big letters. Valerian shuffles over, and I squeeze next to him on the bed, having to fold myself like origami to fit on the pint-sized human bed and open this book, which, of course, was to do with space just like his bedroom. At least it's educational, IGR0AN. Which OT brought this book? Wait, I did, I was that OT. I would never encourage nighttime reading again, I get it now. Valerian looks up at me, blinking and yawning with a cute little face staring at me expectantly. I start reading and get to some part on the Milky Way and glance down, hoping he is asleep, but then I make eye contact with eyes that match mine. He was awake. Why do you do me like this? I was aware I was chucking a tantrum, knew it was a tantrum, but for the love of God, go to sleep. Stifling a growl and the urge to toss the book out the window, I continued reading. I knew Marin could feel my frustration, possibly feel the weight. Zoe owes me big for her crotch goblin waking my boy when I could finally get in some time. Even reading to Valerian, she kept mumbling about pink unicorns or some crap. I was near tempted to duct tape her mouth shut or put her in the hall. Lucky she is cute and kind of growing on me. To be honest, she had me at Uncle Lucian, so I guess I wouldn't disown her yet, and I would let her stay. I continued reading this encyclopedia on space. An hour goes by, and I swear I heard Marin chuckle in the room down the hall. She was enjoying my torment. I almost did a happy dance when I noticed the fruit of my loins had finally crashed and carefully snuck off his bed. Stepping over Casey only to find her staring up at me, and in her hands was another book. Ah, sweetie, my throat is dry, I tell her, and she pouts, fluttering the lashes of her big hazel eyes. You can have a sip from my drink bottle, Uncle Lucian, she says while beaming and holding it up. That word again, but it sounds so endearing. Uncle has a nice ring to it. That's it. Zoe is on my most wanted list, off with her head. Casey moves over and rummages on the shelf, pulling out a book that thankfully only had about 20 pages. She holds up her drink bottle to me, and I shake my head. Definitely not drinking from that after she slurped on it. For your throat, so you can read, she said, and I heard Marin snicker. She is sorely mistaken if she thinks she is getting out of it, or would be by the time I was done with her. No amount of willpower could stop the gagging cough as I squirted the tiniest amount of her water in my mouth. The time it took for me to swallow it and not run for the bathroom and sanitize my mouth was the longest few seconds of my life. It was like forcing myself to swallow a golf ball. You can have some more, I don't mind sharing, Casey chirps. Does she not know whose father I am? Does she not see that he gets his strange behaviors from me? Casey insists on me drinking some more of her backwash drink bottle, and I gag. The water tasted slimy. It shouldn't taste slimy. Why is it slimy? That was definitely spit and I think, a piece of cookie. I looked at the drink bottle and the tiny hole at the top before looking down at Casey. How? I wanted answers on how she could get a cookie in her drink bottle. It makes no sense, and I just swallowed it. Casey, now happy my non-existent thirst was quenched, hands me her book. I was going to hunt down the author or director, whoever invented prancing trolls, and murder them. They deserved death. I understood Valerian's hate for the movie, show, whatever the heck it was. The kid was obsessed. And I don't mean slightly, I am pretty certain Casey was their #1 fan. They should be giving her freebies at this point. She was a walking, talking promotion for them. Even the hairbands in her braided hair had Princess Poppy on them. I settled next to her reading it to her. I tried to skim a few lines to hurry it up. But she caught me. She is obsessed. I don't know why she needed me to read it. She knew it word for word and could probably recite it backward. After the 5th read-through, she finally passed out, and I made a quick dash for the bathroom and chugged down half a bottle of mouthwash before brushing my teeth and finishing the other half of mouthwash. I needed to cleanse my insides of the bacteria I had just ingested. I shiver at the thought of the germs in that bottle. I sneak back to my room with a sigh of relief and shut the door and flick the lock. I mentally debated dragging the dresser in front of it, too, but figured surely they couldn't pick a lock. Turning around, I looked at the bed. Nope, not happening. She was asleep. I did not just ingest a slobbered-on piece of cookie and drink spit water, and read half the library for her to fall asleep before I got back. Nope, she is paying up. I briefly wondered if I could get her to pay up for the kiss she owes, maybe kiss my little head instead of my big one. I ponder cursing Zoe and the kids for a few seconds before climbing in the bed like a creeper and stalking my mate. Sneaking between the sheets, I climb between her legs only for her to knee me in the face. Are you all right? She mumbles, half asleep. Lucian, it's late, she whines and yawns. Chapter 62. Marin, it was the feel of warm hands on my skin that pulled me from my sleep. I tried to stay awake for him, but after the first hour passed, sleep was calling me, so I had drifted off into oblivion. I was still stuck in the remnants of my dream when I felt him grab my legs. Half asleep and shamed awake, I acted accordingly and brought my knee up. Are you all right? I gushed, hoping I didn't hurt him, though why couldn't he wake me, like a normal person I did not know? I heard him grunt and curse under his breath before dragging me closer to him. Lucian, it's late, I yawned, rubbing my eyes. Lucian's lips press to my shoulder before he turns his face toward mine, which lay heavily on his shoulder. I love you, he whispers, and I smile, bumping his nose with mine before pecking his lips. What's there not to love? I'm pretty great, I chuckle. Is that right? Should I be hurt you didn't say it back? He laughed softly. No, then say it, he whispered. Tell me you love me, save my ego. I chuckle at his words before gripping his face in my hands and pushing him back so I could see his face. He was breathtaking when vulnerable. He was all the time, but the uncertainty of 3 words I could see truly worried him. I love you, Lucian Solace, I have since I found out you were mine, I tell him, letting him. The whole time, he laughs, and I chuckle. Yep, all that time, I just loved to hate you then. And now? I just love you, I whispered, wrapping my arms around his neck and tugging his lips back to mine. Chapter 63. The following morning was a rat race, as we tried to get the kids dressed and ready for the day. Pulling a shirt over Valerian's head, he instantly whined as I crinkled the collar. Valerian, I haven't got time, not today, I told him. Of all the days he wanted to have a meltdown, it had to be the day of the Alpha meeting. It would be held at 3 p.m., and I was a nervous wreck already. Valerian chucks a full-on meltdown, tugging at his shirt and crying. Lucian came over from making his and Casey's cereal. The shirt looked acceptable to me before gripping the hem and lifting it off him. Calm down, the hotel is fine, Marin. You're stressing for no reason, Lucian says while wandering off to get him a new shirt. Lucian returns with a button-up one and carefully does the buttons, making sure not to wrinkle his shirt before sitting Valerian at the table. My brain felt fried with the list of things I had to check once back to the hotel and help set up, though Lucian assured me he would help. How I wasn't sure because I needed him to watch both kids since Zoe and I would be helping set up. I have to duck down to the council really quick, then I will head to the hotel to help you, Lucian tells me. Well, you need to take the kids with you. Zoe and Dante are already setting up, and I need to check the restaurant and check off the catering supplies, I tell him. No, my father is watching them for us, and I already asked Zoe who was fine with him taking Casey too, you just have to meet him downstairs in the wine garden. There is a kid play area, Lucian says, coming over and pecking my lips. Wait, what time? I called after him. Just head down after they finish eating. Dad's taking them to the movies and to lunch and will meet us at the hotel, Lucian called over his shoulder before walking out the door. I sighed, looking over at the kids who were happily eating their Fruit Loops. Thank God Callan was taking them. I don't think I could handle their sugar rush today. The wine gardens were lovely, though the stares I received from everybody were beginning to annoy me. I couldn't wait until it was out just so people would FK off with their glares. Casey and Valerian were climbing on the climbing frames and swinging on the frames when I got a text message from Callan saying he was running a little late. Though I was surprised he had my phone number, Lucian must have given it to him. Ah, Casey, don't eat that, I tell her, racing over as she was about to eat a snail. But why, that lady is, Casey says, pointing to the woman at the table who was eating escargot snails. Valerian pulls a face at the woman as she eats one that was on her lettuce. Still don't eat it. Snail slime is poisonous, I tell her, wiping her hands free of the handful of snails she had collected from the garden. Then why is she eating them? Arg, come on Callan, then you can answer these questions, I internally groaned. Because they are a delicacy, and they are cooked, not fresh from the garden, I tell her. Gross, if you ask me, why would anyone eat a slug? Valerian asked, plucking a snail from the garden where I just made Casey drop them. It came out of its shell, and he drops it, pulling a face, and I chuckle at him when a voice from another table reaches my ears. Seems Lucian needs to up his standard, especially for the price we pay, letting rogues in here, such a shame, the middle-aged woman says, turning her gaze to me. Valerian growls at her, shocking me, and goes to say something, I grip his shoulder gently, and he looks up at me and I shake my head. Mind your place, boy, rogue and their mutts shouldn't be allowed in the presence of the elite, she sneered, and I glared at her. Biting my tongue. I was not about to cause a scene. I will have to put in a complaint. Looks like the AIFA is letting in all kinds of riffraff in here, it appears so, ma'am, because he let you through his doors, I tell her, sick of whining voice. She seemed appalled that I would even talk back to her, let alone call her the riffraff. How dare you? Do you have any idea who I am? No, and I don't care to. I have standards, and you don't meet them, I tell her, and she huffs, tossing her napkin on the floor before stomping off just as Callan steps into the child's play area. Sorry, I am late, I got caught in traffic." He turned to where I was staring after the woman. "Everything all right?" he asked. "Fine, I need to go," Callan nods, and I turn to the kids, and Casey is stuffing her pockets full of snails. I click my tongue, leaving Callan to deal with it before pecking them both on the cheek and telling them to behave. "I will find you later, dear," Callan says, pecking my cheek and hugging me much to the disgust of those around us. Somehow I don't think I will get used to his sudden affections toward me. I roll my eyes before leaving and looking for Tatum, who was supposed to take me back to the hotel. Only when I walked out the front doors, I stopped, seeing Valerie's truck. I blinked and took a step back, and Tatum climbs out of the driver's seat and shuts the door. My hands went to my eyes, and I rubbed my eyes, holding back the tears. I thought he crushed it. Is it? I couldn't believe my eyes. Tatum smiles before tossing me the keys, her old keychains still attached along with the pendants of 4 steel cut-out girls and 3 babies. The 3 keychain pictures of Valerian, Casey, and Taylor were also still attached. I kissed the keys, trying not to become emotional over an old truck. "He didn't destroy it?" I choked. "Nope, kept it in the garage. I filled it up for you, but she needs a good clean, pretty dusty down there," Tatum says, and I nod. "Lucian said you were stressed this morning. He was going to give it back tonight, but then rang and asked me to give it to you, to help cheer you up," Tatum laughs. "It definitely did that." I hugged him quickly. "Thank you," I tell him before jumping into my truck. I reach over to the glove compartment and unlock it. Relief floods me when I see the letters from Valerie inside. I pull them out, making sure they were all there, including the one for Lucian, which was still sealed. I swallowed before placing it back. It had arrived a few weeks after her passing along with the others for when the kids grew older. I was so devastated about the car because I thought they would never find out what was in them. Placing them in my handbag, I would put them in the safe back at the hotel. Why I didn't in the first place was beyond me. I also grabbed out her storage locker key where all her belongings were and chucked that in my bag along with them. "Starting my baby up," she roared to life. I smiled before pulling 0ut heading home. Chapter 64. Callan, something must have happened with that woman I saw leaving as I watched Marin leave. She seemed upset, turning back to Valerian and little Casey. Both were in a mood. "Poppy, can you get us a drink?" Valerian asked, and I smiled. He looked so much like Lucian when he was his age. His big amber eyes looking back at me reminded me of his father, though Lucian had grown out of his dimples. "Of course. What would you like?" I asked them both. "Banana milkshake," Casey squealed, and I smiled before looking at Valerian, though I had a funny feeling of what he would ask for before he said it, especially if he was indeed like his father. "Vanilla, please," I nodded, happy I was right before looking around for the servers. Not seeing any, I spied the bar, which only had a small line. "Okay, wait here, I will be right back." "I am just going over there," I point the bar out, which was only a couple of meters away before stepping through the playground's safety gate. Excited for the day I planned to distract the kids. It kind of reminded me of when I used to take Lucian out. Every Sunday was our day. Every Sunday was an adventure when he was a small boy, always hunting for unknown places to take him. I place the kids' orders and order them some subs to take with us too, before turning to look back at them. I waved before realizing they were gone. 2 minutes, if that. I had turned around for only a few moments and they just disappeared. Racing back to the playground, I searched the tunnels, climbed into the cubbyholes at the top, and checked the slides. They were gone, and my stomach sank, my heart racing like a drum at the thought of losing them. Hey, the kids that were in here, did you see where they went? I asked, grabbing a security guard's arm. He looked behind me at the playground and shrugged. I didn't see any kids, Alpha Callan. I want all hotel security looking for a boy and girl. The girl is in a pink dress with, what is the name? I tried to think of the name of that show she liked, the one Lucian complained about. Trolls, it's a pink troll's dress, the boy a light blue button-up shin and navy slacks. The guard stands rattling off their descriptions across his radio before turning to me. Their names? Casey and Valerian, I tell him, scanning the gardens for any trace of them. How could I lose them, and why would they leave? And whose kids are they? My grandkids, just find them, I snapped, darting off and yanking my phone from my pocket. My hands shook as I punched in the numbers. I dial my son's number again, missing a couple of numbers in my haste as I ran through the foyer, looking for any sign of them. I managed to dial the correct numbers a few seconds later, scanning the place while I wait for my son to answer. What's up? My stomach sank at the thought of what I was about to tell him, and I felt sick, like I was about to throw up. Marin, and he would never trust me again. My heart thudded painfully against my ribs, so hard I was at serious risk of heart fail. Do these kids not realize I am old? I can't get a fright like this. I lost them, I lost the kids. What do you mean, you lost them? My son snapped, his voice slightly hysterical. They were right there, then I went to get them a milkshake, and I turned around. They were gone. I panicked, racing through the restaurants and bars, looking for them. They couldn't have gone far, I am on my way. Lucian replies. Okay, I will ring Marin, I tell him, dreading that call. No, let's see if we can find them first. They couldn't have left the hotel, Lucian says, hanging up. I had every member of available staff looking for them. The entire security personnel was searching, and even a few police has showed up to help me search the place when a call came over the radio. Found them. They were in the kitchens hiding, a chef calls over the radio. The immense relief I felt could not be explained as I made my way to their location. Pulling my phone out, I called my son back to let him know, and he told me he was nearly here. No doubt to rouse at the kids for hiding on me. Walking into the kitchens, both kids were sitting on milk crates, the chef standing over them with his arms folded, not looking impressed. I caught them tampering with the mayor's wife's food, the chef tells me, and I put my hand on my hips. Well, haven't you two been up to mischief? I asked them. She was mean to my mum, Valerian huffs, and I tilt my head. Who was? That lady with the curly hair and pig's nose, Valerian said before getting up and walking to the double doors. He points out a table, and my brows raise. Alpha Nixon's wife, she was a nasty woman. What did she do? I asked him. Said we weren't welcome in here, called us riff-raff, Valerian says, and I growl. You should not have run off like that. You should have told me. Your father is distraught and on his way here, I tell him, and he drops his head. The chef watched as I turned to look at him. You didn't serve her the spoiled food? No, caught them just in time, sir, I nod. Very well, I will take it to her and make these two apologize, I tell him, and he nods, handing me a tray that had escargot on it and a bowl of soup. I give the children a scolding look before noticing a snail in Casey's hand and chuckle. Were you going to put live ones in her food? I laugh, shaking my head. She is the one that wants to eat slugs, Valerian pouted before glaring out the doors at the woman. I glanced around and noticed the chef was busy cooking at the back, and no one was paying attention. I saw nothing, I tell the kids, placing the tray down and turning my back on it. Hey? I saw nothing, I tell Valerian, nodding toward the snails in Casey's hands. She pulls more from her pocket. How many did this kid stow away? Valerian giggles when a waitress notices, and I nod to her. She glances at the table number on the tray before looking out the door and pressing her lips in a line as she snickered. I saw nothing either, she says, sending me a wink. Grabbing the tray, I see the snails had been replaced and one was even swimming around in her soup. Allow me, the server says, and I glance at her name tag. Thank you, Stacy, I tell her, handing it to her. She nods, smiling at the two mischief makers behind me who were giggling, taking the tray out and setting it in front of her. She nods and thanks Stacy while we watch from the kitchens when Lucian busts through the doors. Relief is clear on his face, and the kids duck behind me, peering up at him under my arms. Lucian lets out a breath. You two have some explaining to do, he scolds before being cut off by the shrill screams coming from the restaurants. I try not to laugh as I watch the woman spit her food out and jump back from the table. Lucian turned, looking out at the commotion while the woman was shrieking and waving waiters over. The kids laughed behind me, and I erupted and joined them, and my son looked at me before folding his arms across his chest. What did you do to the city mayor's wife? I saw nothing, I tell him, and he looks at the children. Pop said we could, Valerian snitches and I look away. Well, I thought it was quite funny. I stand by what I said, I saw nothing, Lucian sighs. I hope she chokes, Casey says, pursing her lips and squinting her little eyes at the woman. And why is that? Lucian asks her. Seems the woman doesn't like rogues in your hotel, son, I tell him. Good, let's introduce you both then, shall we? Lucian asks. She was mean to Mum, Valerian pouts with teary eyes. Well, we can't have that, can we? Lucian says, holding his hand out to my grandson. If only I had, all those years ago, to have Valerie on my arm and by my side. I thought guiltily. I won't allow my son to make my mistakes. But Dad, she is the mayor's wife, and this city is owned by me and Pop. We elected her husband as mayor, and I can easily remove his status, Lucian tells him. Good, then I want to be the mayor, Valerian says, and I chuckle. Aim higher, my boy. No name holds more power than Solace in this city, I tell him, and he looks up at me with a sparkle in his eyes. Oh, he would be a terrific alpha one day. Chapter 65. Marin, we had managed to lose one of the cheese platters for one table and the 3 snack platters, and I had rung Lucian, who said he would sort it out and bring some from his restaurant. Sliding my handbag over my shoulder after that mini heart attack was sorted, I finally walked to my office. Retrieving the letters, I stuffed them and the keys in the safe when my office door opened, and Callan walked in. All dressed nicely in his suit, looking every part of the alpha he should, he flopped into a chair looking exhausted, although dressed to impress. While I looked like a staff member, not that I owned pretty formal dresses or would wear them, I preferred organizing the events, not being a part of them. Where is Valerian? I asked him. Just dropped him to Zoe with Casey. Lucian is taking the platters you needed to the kitchen, he says, looking rather frazzled. Is everything okay? I asked, wondering why he had hunted me down, though people had arrived early. However, the function didn't officially start for another hour. Grabbing the box with the name labels in them for the tables, I tucked it under my arm. Oh, we are moving again, Callan chuckled, reaching for the box under my arm. He takes it from me, following me out of my office. Is there a reason you came searching for me? I asked him. Callan cleared his throat, and I could tell he was nervous about something. He told me about losing the kids and about the snails, which made me chuckle. You're not upset? Callan asked, and I shook my head. Nope, I lost Valerian for an hour when he was 2. He wandered out of the apartment, found him in the daycare, the scariest hour of my life. I was frantic. These things happen, I tell him, walking back toward the restaurant when I spotted my father by the end of the corridor. He was in a grey suit talking to someone with his back to us. I also needed to speak to you about Lucian, Callan said before stopping and looking at me when he realized I had stopped. He followed my gaze to where my father was talking to someone. Callan looked at me before looking at the door beside me and stuffed me into a storage room where we kept linens. Callan! I heard my father call out, but luckily I was already obscured inside the darkroom. Callan looked at me and stuffed the box in my arms, shutting the door but not wholly. Alpha John, lovely to see you again, Callan said when I heard my father growl at him. What I heard from Alpha Nixon's wife saying your son was marrying another, my father snarled angrily. Our deal still stands, Alpha John, not if your son doesn't marry my daughter. We had a deal, my father snarled, and I covered my mouth with my hand, trying to muffle any noises when I bumped a shelf and knocked something off it. I quickly darted behind the door. What was that? My father asked, and the door was suddenly shoved open. I must have bumped something. I was looking for a bathroom and wandered into a linen closet, Callan said, his back coming into view as he opened the door, blocking me from my father as he peered in. Reeks of rogue in here. Why of the places your son would hold it here is beyond me. Did you know this place is apparently owned by a rogue? Alpha Nixon's wife told me, my father says, and the door shuts again. Once again Callan left it slightly ajar, and I looked between the gap. Ironic that the place he holds this meeting is at his own mother's hotel, though how it ended up out of your hands, I don't know. Must have pissed your dear old mate off for her to give to some random WE, Callan growls at him. Mind your tone, John. Valerie may be dead, but I won't listen to talk about her, Callan growled. My father scoffed. Coming from a man you tossed her aside, I will say what I like, my father breathed. Callan growled and I heard his claws scratch the wood of the door. Your son better announce my daughter as his future mate Callan, or I will tell Lucian about Valerie. We had a deal, I assure you my son will take your daughter as his mate, Callan reassures him, and my father growls. He better, Callan, or your little secret is out, my father says, stalking off down the hall. I hear Callan sigh and he waits a few minutes when I hear his voice. Coast is clear, Marin. You don't need to hide, Callan says, and I pull open the door. He turns to me with a grim smile on his face. That is what my father has over you. Why you were so quick to accept me? I asked him. That is not the only reason, Marin. I made mistakes, ones I refused to allow my son to repeat. As much as I loved Valerie, I was too worried about my reputation. When I lost her, I realized what I had done. I punished not only her, but I also punished myself. Callan admits. So if Lucian doesn't marry Ava, my father will tell him about Valerie. Callan shakes his head. The deal was he had to marry his daughter. He never stated which one, Callan says. I cluck my tongue. I couldn't believe this was happening right now. Nevertheless, I understood why Callan was talking to my father after years of rivalry. Why does he want my sister to marry Lucian? It makes no sense, honestly, dear. I have no idea, I have tried to figure it out myself. When he confronted me about Valerie, I panicked, and I agreed. Valerie, I already lost. I couldn't bear the thought of losing my son too, Callan said. I nodded, just the thought of Valerie brought tears to my eyes. Anything else to this deal you made? I asked, wanting to know everything and what I was up against. Yes, Lucian had to mark and mate her within the week of the Alpha meeting, Callan tells me, and I curse and mutter under my breath. Wait, when you say mate, do you mean to force the heat? I ask him, and Callan nods, looking away guiltily. He wants to make sure his daughter is with child, to ensure her future. He was planning on injecting Ava with the hormones to ensure she got pregnant. I do not plan on having another baby anytime soon, so no forced heat. I will let him mark me. Thank you, Marin. I shake my head and hold my finger up, telling him to wait. I can't carry this secret, Callan, I can't. You must know how heavy it is yourself. I look at him, and all I see is her. My lip quivers as I think of Valerie, who she was to me, who she could have been to Lucian. I will let him mark me, but you will tell your son, I have a week to let him mark me, you have a week to tell him, I will not go into this with lies that can unravel us. You want me to be with your son? Then tell him, don't make me have to, I tell him before walking off. Chapter 66. Making my way to the restaurant, I handed the name cards to one of the waitresses, who quickly raced around placing them out following the seating arrangements. Lucian came out of the kitchen with a garment bag slung over his shoulder and smiled when he spotted me. He was dressed in a black suit, looking handsome like always. Valerian was also dressed in a suit and was playing with Casey with some other children that had arrived early when Lucian approached me, coming up behind me. He nestled his face into my neck, which earned a curious stares when his hand went to my hip to tug me back against him. You're not wearing that, he growled and looked down at my uniform. And I am not wearing that, if it is a dress, I told him as he draped it over my arm as I rearranged some of the decorations. Ah, well, good thing it's not. I know you don't wear dresses because I have yet to see you in one. Although you will have to wear a dress eventually, and why is that, Alpha Lucian? I asked. Because usually the groom wears a suit to a wedding, so for one day you will have to it and wear a dress. I like how you assume I will marry you. What if I want to keep my name? We can hyphenate it, he chuckles, kissing my jaw while I pull a face at the thought. Fine solace it is, I laugh. Good choice, because I wasn't changing mine to Lucian Summers, he says, and I swat his arm with my hand. Go get changed, he says, giving me a nudge toward the rear doors that led to the back where my apartment was. I sighed, taking the garment bag and heading for my apartment. I changed quickly into the white pantsuit before running the brush through my hair and tying it up. Looking in the mirror, I pursed my lips before walking into Zoe's room and rummaging through her makeup bag and taking some of her cosmetics. I did a rush job of my makeup, knowing people would be already arriving, and I still had to place a few things out on the tables and check the seating arrangements again. Last thing we needed was for rival alphas and outside alphas being seated together. Looking in the mirror one last time, I felt like an imposter and sucked in a sharp breath. Trying to find the courage to go out there and face not only my father but all those alphas who were here for the announcement. After today everything will change. I would no longer be Marin, the rogue, but Luna Marin, and that thought scared me as much as it excited me. How over the years I had changed. From having nothing to becoming a hotel owner, and soon once more, to Luna. Our village was growing larger, and that responsibility hung heavily over me. Valerie's voice came to mind, whenever the health and safety people would mock our attempts to get this place running. Mitcha was the worst. Zoe blackmailed him into helping fix the wiring in the place. He walked around and checked the place out. He then burst out laughing in our faces. He found it hilarious. "I am not wasting my time, you will never get this place up and running," he mocked with a shake of his head. Valerie refused to hear it. She stepped forward, and I saw the fear in his eyes while she held none. The woman was fearless. Mitcha had taken a frightened step back at the look she gave him. He dared not challenge her. There was something with the way she carried herself. She did not fear pack wolves. No, Valerie was her own pack, and she let us be a part of it. She protected us, and this was home. True alphas preserve their home and those that live in it. She was our alpha. Mitcha visibly gulped as she got up close and sneered as she looked him up and down. She said 2 words as she snatched the tool from his hand. 2 words that always stuck with me. Mitcha challenged her, and she loved a challenge. "Watch me," she said before turning on her heel and walking to the power box. She shut the power off and undid the screws holding the cover over the exposed wires. I shook my head at the memory and smiled to myself. It kind of became our mantra. Fueled by everyone trying to knock us back. The day before we got the official notice and were told we could open our doors, we sat in the restaurant admiring our handiwork. The place looked fantastic. We were sipping our beers covered in paint and G0D knows what else. Valerie was leaning against the counter, watching us. She always watched us. She always let us know how proud she was of what we had accomplished. "We actually did it," she said, and we nodded. All of us were exhausted, yet our spirits were good. "You will never do it. That is what I will tell you girls from now on," Valerie laughed. "Watch us," we said collectively with a laugh. "That's my girls, and they will watch, and you will show them what us rogues are made of," she said proudly. It became our mantra, and when I fell behind in my night classes, trying to juggle kids, work, and school, I felt defeated. Valerie wandered over to me, cigarette between her lips where I sat sulking, looking at my failed test. My bag was between my feet. I had opened the letter before leaving and was supposed to leave for class. I sighed and rested my head against the brick wall, feeling like I had let her down. "What are you looking at?" she asked. "My stupid test. I failed," I grumbled. "Let me look," she said, snatching the paper from my hands. She peered at it and sighed. "Might as well throw in the towel, you'll never do it," she clicked her tongue, and I squinted my eyes at her. The corner of her lips tugged in the corners. "Should probably quit this place too, barely made a dent." "The place looks like crap," she said, motioning around to all the work we are doing all day. She dragged back on her smoke and raised an eyebrow at me. I pursed my lips, and she smiled. She crumpled the paper and tossed it into the bin, and I snatched my bag up off the ground. "Watch me," I said, using the words I heard her say many times over. The challenge brought on. She smirked. "Oh, I am," she laughed. 2 words and they always put a fire in my belly. So, with that, I headed to the restaurant. Valerie handed this place to Valerian and me. This was my home, and now I was not only fighting to keep it running, but I was also fighting for the rogues, our village built from nothing. So nothing my father could say or do could touch me. We beat the odds, we built an empire, and I won't let one alpha intimidate me. If Valerie taught me anything, it was to know my worth, and the only one who got to determine that was me, not my father, not my mate, not those who tried to suppress me. I no longer had to prove anything to anyone because I proved it to myself, and there is no feeling that is more empowering than knowing your own value. Reaching the doors, I was bombarded instantly as those brought in to help cater scrambled with last-minute alterations and tasks. I had walked in halfway through the opening speeches, clipboard in hand. I looked over the guest lists before walking out the back to check the kitchen to see if the chefs needed help. The place was packed, and Callan was addressing those that attended. I had been to plenty of these growing up, and I knew Lucian planned to make the announcement at the end of the night. A few hours in, and everyone was mingling. I watched the alphas mingle among each other. Looking over at the table Lucian was it. He nodded to the chair beside him, but I shook my head. I still hadn't seen my father and was waiting for it. Callan, I knew, wanted to keep things civil as long as possible, so I kept my distance, biding my time. But when a commotion happened toward the back of the room, I recognized my father's voice instantly. You spilled it all over me," he said, standing up. I tilted my head to the side, and I saw Lucian stand and look in his direction along with a heap of other alphas. My server fumbled, trying to clean up the mess. Zoe also went over to help, and I noticed Dante lingering in the background as she approached. Difficult patrons were something we dealt with on the regular. This was nothing and an easy fix for her. "Do you have any idea how expensive this suit is?" My father growled at Sarah. Zoe places her hand on Sarah's shoulder. "May I know what the issue is, Alpha?" "Yes, she spilled wine on my shirt. Accidents happen, Alpha. I am sure we can organize dry cleaning or possibly a fresh shirt," Zoe answers quickly while tidying up the table. My father sneers, and Zoe nods for Sarah to go, and she rushes off, coming toward the kitchens. "You okay?" I ask her, touching her arm as she escaped into the kitchen, looking rather shaken. "BL00DYPR, CK, he bumped my arm as I was pouring," she said. I nodded to the kitchen, and she sighed with relief while I leaned against the frame. I chuckled when I saw Macy a few tables away, watching Zoe. Ready to crack the alpha with a bottle if needed. She knew who he was, so did Zoe, and not once did she stammer. She spoke professionally and did her job while my father ranted about lowly rogues. We had heard it all, and it no longer fazed us. There wasn't a name he could come up with that we hadn't heard once or twice before. As I said, "Sir, we can offer to have dry cleaned or replaced for you," Zoe told him. "I want her fired, I want to speak to the manager," he demanded. "You are speaking with one alpha," Zoe told him before waving Macy over. "I will give him one thing," he knew how to cause a scene, as everyone watched with eager eyes. Dante looked like he was about to drag Zoe away from the threat. Oblivious at the back, the kids were playing and stuffing their tiny faces. "This is Macy, also another manager here," Zoe said, introducing them. Macy started with polite words, ever the professional, well, until he started ranting at her and making a fool of himself. I noticed Ava shrink in her seat. Embarrassed by our father's behavior. Those on the other tables whispered amongst themselves, and I saw the woman from Lucian's hotel was also seated at my father's table, agreeing and nodding to everything he said. "Sir, if you don't calm down, I am going to have to escort you from the premises," Macy told him. And she would if needed. She had a bat behind the counter, and she wasn't afraid to use it and had done it many times. Though this was slightly different from the everyday usuals we dealt with, this was a room full of alphas, but that wouldn't stop her. "Escort me? Who do you think you are?" "I want to speak to the owner," my father demanded. Zoe looked over at me, and I nodded to her. She turned back to my father. "She is on her way, Alpha," I heard Zoe say as I made my way through the tables. "Lucian went to stand to come with me." But I motioned with my hand to stay where he was. I didn't need him behind me. I could fight my own battles, and this was my hotel, my workers, and he was my father. My father sat down while he waited, arms folded across his chest. Macy and Zoe stepped away, and I took their place. "Is there a problem, Alpha?" I asked. My father looked at me before his eyes went to those seated at his table, mouth opening and closing like a fish. My mother just stared unblinkingly at me while my father stumbled for words. Ava, however, snickered before covering her mouth, trying to stifle her laughter. "Ah, yes. I wanted to speak to the owner," my father finally says with a wave dismissing me, clearly, over his shock at seeing me. And yet, standing in a room full of alphas, he would still try to deny knowing me. That was fine. They were about to find out. "You're looking at her," I tell him, motioning to myself. If seeing me hadn't shocked him, then finding out I was the owner definitely did. "But you're a rogue," he sneered. "No, I am rogue, and that word will not be tolerated in my hotel, Alpha, or should I say, father?" I asked, smiling down at him. Chapter 67. The collective gasp that left the table was audible, and I could see everyone looking in our direction while my father sputtered for words. However, Ava howled with laughter. So much so that the mayor's wife looked at her as though she was absurd. It was really hard to keep my composure because my sister had the funniest laugh. Ava had one of those laughs that made you laugh because the sound was ridiculous. My mother elbows her and shuts her up effectively with a glare while my father growls at me. His canine slipped from between his parted lips as he glared up at me. The mayor's wife looked at my father questionably. "You have another daughter?" she asked, clearly shocked by this news. Alpha Nixon, who was about my father's age, with thick blonde hair combed to one side, looked outraged as he stared at us all. My father tried to explain before turning his anger on me, and his hands slapped the table, but I just stared unflinchingly. This was my home, and if he wanted to deny my existence, fine, but he wouldn't be doing it under my roof. My mother gripped his forearm, and she glared at Alpha Nixon's wife like she was about to have a go at her, but a growl from my father had put her head down as he glared daggers at me. "You are not my daughter, you haven't been since the day you became a rogue." His words stopped when I felt tingles rush across my neck as fingertips and a warm palm cupped the side of it before moving to my shoulder. Lucian's scent wafted to me before I felt his lips graze my jawline as he buried his face in the side of my neck. My father's anger dissolved as he stared in shock. Lucian tugged me to his side when his hand moved down my arm to my waist, pulling me closer to him. The room turned silent, so silent you could hear a pin drop. "I don't think I have introduced my mate," Lucian said calmly, though his aura was deadly, and Alpha Nixon's wife dropped her head, her cheeks heating. I noticed how uncomfortable all the alphas became in the room, the tension high as Lucian, the most prominent figure in the city and strongest, most feared alpha, addressed my father. My father huffed and shook his head before he blew up. Alpha Nixon glared at my father, and my father looked at Ava, and she shrunk back in her seat. Although the smile never left her lips, this was prime entertainment for her. "I know exactly who this rogue is, and she is not your mate," he added, shooting me a glare. "See, that is where you are wrong, Alpha John. Marin is no rogue. She is my mate and Luna of the Nightshade Pack," Lucian said. "You are mistaken, this girl is a rogue. I don't know what she has told Alpha Lucian, but she has a son. She has tricked you," my father dared to say. Murmurs broke out throughout the room. "You mean Valerian?" Alpha Lucian asked before turning to look at the back of the room where all the children were. I glanced over to see Valerian watching us, and Lucian waved him over. Valerian smiled and rushed to his father, and Lucian bent down and picked him up with one arm. "Who is that, Daddy?" Valerian whispered, looking at my parents curiously. "That is your grandfather, grandmother, and your Auntie Ava," Lucian whispered to him and kissed his cheek. The whispers in the background grew louder as everyone watched the Blood Alpha, the most notorious alpha in the city, doting on his son. My father sputtered, lost for words, and Lucian gripped my waist tighter as he turned to look at my father. "I'd like to introduce you to my son, Valerian Salas. The resemblance is uncanny, don't you think?" Lucian smirked, daring my father to deny what he was saying. Valerian could not be mistaken for anyone else's son. Lucian's bloodline was the only bloodline in the city with a genetic mutation that caused them all to have Embers eyes. No other wolf I have come across had that trait, and more than that, they had the same scent, and Valerian's aura could already be felt, showing he was born from not one alpha but two alpha wolves. Anyone looking close enough could tell they were father and son. If anyone had their doubts, no one spoke up. They knew better than to piss off my mate. "The eyes," Alpha Nixon murmured, looking at Valerian and Lucian before staring up at my father questionably. He tossed his napkin on the table before turning his questioning to my father, and I saw a few other alphas stand and look over at my son and Lucian, also recognizing the obvious traits most looked past when seeing my son. Cameras flashed around us everywhere, and I knew this would be splashed all over the morning paper tomorrow and in news headlines. "Did you know?" Alpha Nixon asked, looking at my father and mother. My mother had her head down, not liking the change in direction and the accusation behind Alpha Nixon's words. How could he? Alpha John had her existence wiped from every database in the city the moment she refused to abort my grandson, came Callan's voice as he came up behind us. "We had a deal," my father growled. "And the deal still stands. You said Lucian was to marry your daughter, or are you going to continue to deny that Marin here is?" Callan asked, and my father growled before glaring at me. My father stood, and the veins in his neck bulged and throbbed with growing anger as he fought the urge to shift, his claws scratching down the table and slicing through the thin cloth. His entire body trembled with rage, and Lucian passed Valerian to me before shoving me behind him. "If you have an issue, John, about who my mate is, I suggest we take it outside," Lucian warned him, his tone deadly calm yet the warning clear. My father knew he was no match for Lucian, maybe in his younger years, but not now. Lucian's aura outmatched all those in this room, and one thing about auras is it was a warning for who you were messing with. And Lucian's outweighed everyone here, proving he was the real king of this city. No one in this room was daring enough to go up against him. He didn't get the title of the Blood Alpha for not shedding blood and destroying those who challenged him. My father sneered before looking down at my mother, who had remained silent. "We are leaving," he growled at her, grabbing her arm and ripping her up to stand by his side. My father stood, pulling my mother with him as everyone at the surrounding tables jumped away. "Ava now!" My father boomed, and she smirked as she stood before speaking loud enough that the entire room heard the following words that left her lips. No doubt she would pay for them when she got home, but I could see the defiance and determination to call my father out publicly. "I'll catch you later, sis," she chuckled, pecking my cheek as she went to pass me before cupping Valerian's cheek with her hand. "Gosh, how you have grown, and you look like your father," she laughed and sent me a wink. My father growled and snarled, baring his teeth at her, and she smiled before strolling after my father. "Well, that was an interesting change in events," I heard an alpha say from another table. I glanced over at the man, and he undid his tie, tossing it on the table. "Indeed it is," Alpha Nixon and also the city mayor said as he pursed his lips. I turned and stared after my father as he shoved through the exit doors, the media outside snapping photos, and we all heard his furious growl ring out through the night, making them jump away and scatter in fright. Back to the celebrations, everybody. I need a drink, Callan said, breaking the strange tension that had returned. Passing Valerian back to Lucian, he looked at me. What's wrong? He asked, and I shook my head. I'll be back, I told him, darting off and out the doors after my family that had left. The camera lights hurt my eyes as I tried to look for the car. Spotting it, I rushed over to them before my mother could get in. Mom! I called, and she looked at me before looking back at the car. She moved toward me, and my father got back out of the car and yelled at her to get back in. I clutched her hands, and my father's fury was enough to keep the media away. No one dared come close enough to hear us. My mother hugged me, and my father growled and screamed at her. I have to go, she whispered, with tears in her eyes. She glanced at my furious father, who was about to stalk over to her, no doubt to drag her back to the car. I will call you. Now I know where you are, he can't keep me away. I have to go before your father comes over. Wait, just let me, she shook her head and squeezed my fingers. I have to go. I need to calm your father down. You have no idea what you have just done, she said, confusing me before rushing off and past my father, who stalked toward her. He stopped looking me up and down and sneered, about to say something before looking over my shoulder. I turned to see what he was looking at, only to see Lucian coming up behind me. My father growled before turning on his heel and returning to his car. Lucian wrapped his arms around my waist, pulling me against him and away as my father reversed out of his parking spot. My father tore out of the place, speeding off down the road. I sighed, what a long night. Lucian kissed my cheek before pressing his nose into my neck. Are you okay? He whispered, and I nodded, wondering what my mother meant by her words. I will be, I told him before letting him lead me back to the restaurant. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.